The new award-winning short film, The Injustice of Justice, illustrated by the world-renowned artist Molly Crabapple, narrated and written by Keith LaMar, who's fighting to raise awareness about his case and death row. He faces execution January of 2027. The film, The Injustice of Justice, just won the grand prize for the Best Animated Short Film at the Golden State Film Festival. Keith LaMar has been held in prison for 36 years, 32 years in solitary confinement, 30 years on death row. His self-published memoir is Condemned, the whole story. He's joining us now live from death row at Ohio State Penitentiary. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Keith LaMar.
How are you? It's such an honor and pleasure. I can tell you, not just speaking for myself, but for so many people who are inside. We, have been listening to you for decades, and so it's quite an honor. Quite an honor. Thanks so much.
Can you talk about the making of this film, explaining your case and what you're hoping to accomplish right now? You have made this film. You do live concerts that are performed around the world remarkably, where you're joining from death row. You have book clubs where your own book is read, but where you also lead in discussion of other books as well with high schools and other places. Talk about your message, Keith.
Well, I from the very beginning, just wanted to stand on my innocence. It was never really a matter of me not wanting to speak out, to stand up for myself. That was the whole point of me demanding the trial. But the whole system, I soon found out, is centered around obedience, around operating within prescribed parameters and whatnot. And I was advised to remain quiet during my trial and thereafter, and I did. I went along with it. That's what we do. And, other smarter, more learned people would speak on my behalf, would stand up and fight for my life, and I believe that. And I just kept going deeper and deeper into the darkness until I found myself in this really, really desperate place where I was really standing on the brink of my existence. I had to find out the hard way that in order for my life to be mine, that I had to stand up and claim it. So that was really the thing that was the catalyst that pushed me to start speaking up and reaching to utilize my own agency. And all of these things that you just mentioned is a product of that general thrust, that thing that just coming to the conclusion that if I don't stand up right now, then I might lose my life. And so that was the thing that kind of started the movie. I first started, I wrote the book that you mentioned, Condemned, and that was over 200 pages. And not long after that, a dear friend of mine, Lloyd Swain, produced a documentary, which was 30 minutes. And so we was trying to figure out a way to condense it even more because, of course, people have short attention spans. I understand that people have their own problems, have their own lives to live. And so, it's asking a lot to ask someone to sit down and read a 200-some page book or a 30-minute documentary. But we thought that if we condense the story into a 7-minute short, then possibly that could garner more attention. So that was the whole impetus behind creating the movie. My friend, my campaign manager, Amy Goodell, was at the museum, Brian Stevenson Museum in Alabama, and saw a movie that Molly Crabapple had produced. And she had the idea from that maybe this could be applied to my story and we can, put forth a similar project. And we contacted Molly and her team, and, was able to raise the funding through this really kind individual named David Rouse. And, next thing, we had a movie on our hands. And so, yeah, I'm really, really grateful for the whole process, for sure.
Keith LaMar, in your book Condemned, about Bobby Sands. If you can explain who he is, his hunger strike, and how it inspired you to go on a hunger strike, which led to your case being known. I mean, you've been written about in the New York Times. You have jazz greats playing with you, supporting your cause.
Yeah, one of my friends who I think you might know, named Stoughton Lynn, was a famous historian, social activist. He, in the beginning, when I was first sentenced to death row, he somehow found his way into my life. And he sent me that book by Bobby Sands, Nothing But an Unfinished Song, written by Dennis O'Hearn, who has since become a very close friend of mine. He sent me that book, and as I was reading it, it felt as if I was being sent a message. You know, I had been pleading with these people. It was going on 18 years, and a civil suit was 8 years, all to no avail. And, you know, I was reading this book, and it was almost a last-ditch effort before I was about to give up. And Bobby Sands and his comrade, Bobby Sands, for those who don't know, was an Irish prisoner who, along with several of his comrades, went on a hunger strike in Ireland. And, you know, some of their demands were very basic, just to be treated as human beings, which, of course, resonated with me. And not long after I finished that book, I reached out to the author, Dennis O'Hearn. I wrote him. We struck up a correspondence. He came to see me. We became really close friends. And I decided to enact a hunger strike myself, along with several other prisoners here at the Supermax, went on hunger strike. And after 18 years of not being able to break through court cases and all that, in 12 days of being on a hunger strike, I was sitting in the visiting room with my family. And that was like a seminal moment in my journey. It kind of taught me that if anything is going to change, you have to stand up and speak out, you know, on your own. And, you know, one of my literary heroes, Richard Wright, he wrote in his book, Black Boy, that if you speak out who you are, you will discover that you are not alone.
Keith
and, you
LaMar,
know, being in solitary confinement,
I wanted to bring in your lawyer, Keegan Stephan. In one of Trump's first executive orders, January 20th, was to restore the death penalty, Trump said, which includes the order that the Attorney General ensures all states have necessary drugs. This is Keith's second execution date. What is it, January 13th, 2027. If you can explain what happens right now in court, where the case stands in court, and the role of the Ohio governor, Mike DeWine, the position he has taken, since he, not Trump, would decide what happens ultimately to Keith LaMar.
Yes. Hi, Amy, and thanks for elevating Keith's case. You know, Keith, unfortunately, exhausted his direct appeals long ago. The state courts and federal courts looked at his trial and determined incorrectly that there were no constitutional deficiencies and upheld his conviction and his death sentence. I do think that any fair-minded jurist looking at his trial now would deem it unconstitutional and overturn his convictions. Unfortunately, the only way back into court is to find newly discovered evidence. So me and a team of attorneys have been reviewing all the records in his case and talking to witnesses for the last 2 years, trying to turn up newly discovered evidence. We have discovered a lot of new evidence supporting Keith's innocence. You know, I started as a skeptic. I'm a prison abolitionist, definitely an abolitionist of the death penalty. It doesn't matter to me if he's guilty, he shouldn't be put to death. But I can tell you, after looking at the record, talking to witnesses, there is no doubt in my mind that he is actually innocent. And we are working to put together a motion based on the new evidence to get back into court so that we can prove his innocence before his execution date. Unfortunately, you know, there is very little justice in the justice system, as Keith has noted. So it's going to take much more than just litigation. We need a mass movements of people, you know, speaking out, acting out, and pushing the governor to pause his execution once again while we litigate.
Let me give the last word to Keith LaMar. Keith, you're scheduled to die January 13th, 2027, second execution date. First was for lack of drugs to inject into you. Your final message as, what is it, May 31st, they're expected to have a concert at Joe's Pub here. It's your 56th birthday then.
Yes, that's right. You know, I've been living under the threat of death, as you noted at the outset, for over 3 decades. So it's not dying. You know, I've already made peace with the fact that I'm going to die at some point and someday. All of us are. But the thing that really drives me is I'm here. How can I live? You know, you reference all the things that I've accomplished since being on death row, and all those things come from a desire just to live because I'm alive. You know, I had these really amazing musicians come into my life: Abel Marquez, Arturo Ferro, Caroline Davis, Elsa Nielsen. You know,
Keith, we're going to have to leave it there, but we're going to continue the conversation and post it online at democracynow.org. Keith LaMar, artist, teacher, writer, death row prisoner, speaking to us from the Ohio State Penitentiary in Youngstown. I'm Amy Goodman.